What's up, guys? Welcome back to Fight Talk with me, Jimmy Dukes. We got another event breakdown. Defend Your Glory went down September 27th in Las Cruces, New Mexico at the Pan Am. 15 fights. I was cage side commentating. So shout out to Empire for involving me with the event. I got to sit down with Rodzilla, OG here in El Paso, pro MMA fighter. So we got to sit down and watch the fights. But 15 great fights. This was Empire's third MMA match event. And it got bigger. You know what I mean? I love seeing all the different promotions growing in their different ways. So, but yeah, I just wanted to get into this event. And this is just a recap from what I saw and from each of the fights. And I love watching fights, first of all. Second of all, I'm cage side. When I commentate, I get to watch the fight a little bit better than taking pictures or doing video. But yeah, I just want to give you guys my opinion of the whole event. We're gonna go through each fight and what I thought. I love doing these recaps, and I hope you guys enjoy them too. But let's get into it. 15 fights, let's get it. First matchup of the night, we had Tyler Wirch out of 10th Planet Tucson taking on Dre Little out of Empire MMA. And this one didn't take long. Tyler was able to secure an early takedown. Dre had some low kicks first to kind of keep Tyler at bay. Dre is a tall dude. The Northman did his best, but Tyler, just using that 10th Planet system right off the bat, was able to get on top and get a good secure position, and eventually was able to get the tap early. Tyler gets his first debut win in his amateur fighting journey. Unfortunately, Dre goes down to 0-3, being finished 3 straight times. I heard him jokingly say, like, hey, let me just go to kickboxing now. Because, the ground game is part of MMA, guys. A lot of people don't understand or don't like the wrestling or the jiu-jitsu game. But if there's a guy who's really good at stand-up and, is neutralized by somebody that's good on the ground, that just goes to show you how much of MMA is primarily grappling, in my opinion. Unless you can kind of brawl and sprawl, how they say, is not be able to get taken down and make somebody pay for it every time they come in to do for the takedown. But yeah, Dre wasn't able to defend that takedown, wasn't able to get up, but Tyler looked great. I saw him at the weigh-ins the day before, all business. He went in there and made it a point to, to get this first win out of the way to make his debut for Empire MMA. But yeah, Wirch gets it done, submission in the first round. It beats Little. Wirch goes to 1-0 in his amateur career, and Dre goes to 0-3. We'll see where Dre goes. Maybe we'll just see him in some kickboxing or Muay Thai. But look forward to see what Tyler can do, getting that big win off the bat, fighting somebody with 2 fights already under their belt. But that started off the card, so, shout out to Tyler for getting that done, and we'll see what's next for Dre. Next matchup of the night, we had AJ the Disciple versus Cade Smith. Both were making their amateur debut. I didn't know too much about Cade, but I know that I was talking to Jackie from Bloodline and was in his corner, and he said he was more than prepared. I've seen AJ at SFG. I've always kind of seen him on the jiu-jitsu mats, and I saw him at the expo not too long ago, man. He looked good on the floor, so I was excited to see him make his debut as well. But yeah, the first round, they were going back and forth. Cade was doing a good job of just, staying away, keeping AJ at length. Toward the end of the first round, AJ was able to secure a takedown, his first takedown, and was able to finish it. Ended the round on top. Second round, a little bit of the same. Cade was, keeping his distance, throwing punches, throwing kicks, staying further away. Eventually, AJ got another takedown, and it just started, working, and it ended up being a TKO finish. The referee jumped in and stopped the fight. But, man, AJ looked good, man. The Disciple looks good, man. He's such, like, a calm dude. And the cool thing is I get to hang out or talk to these guys or girls that fight. And, everybody fights for different reasons. Everybody has different personalities, man. Like, I was talking to Cade a little bit during the weigh-ins. That was the first time I met him, so it was cool to to see him, make a debut too. And Jackie spoke so highly of him. But man, AJ gets it done, via TKO in the second round. Gets his first debut out of the way, and I'm excited to see what he can do with this man. He's got a great jiu-jitsu background. He's at a great camp. You know what I mean? When you're training with a guy like Ricky at SFG, and that guy is good to go all the time, man, I can only expect so much good things out of AJ, but gets it done in the second round. Congratulations to AJ, and we'll see what Cade is up to the next fight. Moving up from there, we had another debut matches for two guys. We had Aaron Hernandez out of Empire MMA, and we had Jordan Torres out of Legacy. Both guys are 23, coming into this fight, getting their amateur debuts on a good stage. I felt, this fight was a lot of back and forth. Me and Rodzilla were commentating and talking about Aaron's wrestling was so big. It was a kickboxer versus a wrestler. Aaron made it a point to, implement his wrestling. But one thing I wanted to say about Jordan is that once he did get engaged to get taken down, he was making a point to punch, to elbow. So it was one of those things that, like me as an MMA fan, and now that I'm commentating more, I always find it interesting that what is the judge looking at? Is he looking at the takedown? Or is he looking at the guy that got taken down and just is defending the whole time? There was a lot of times where Aaron was able to secure a takedown, but Torres was able to get up and was elbowing and punching, while Aaron was kind of just stuck in just trying to suck him in and take him down and finish the rest of the takedown. So it kept going back and forth like that. But during the stand-up, Jordan made it a good point. He was punching, he was kicking, and, it wasn't anything to hide. Aaron was trying to get a hold of him to take him down. He had at least, I want to say at least 4 or 5 good takedowns. And while Jordan was getting held up against the cage or on the floor, he was always just scoring points. Eventually they ended up going to 3 rounds. And I don't know what happened with the scorecards or whatever, but it ended up being a draw. I think they initially had given the fight to Aaron, but I think the scorecards were messed up, and they ended up being a draw. After I rewatched the fight, I can see how it was a draw. I usually don't pick fights or winners and things like that, but I was able to go back, look at the footage, and I was, you know what? That was an even match. So the fact that they both got their debut out of the way at such a young age, they're both 23. They're both tall guys. I'm just curious to see what happens in their next fight, because they went all 3 rounds. It's to go 3 rounds in an MMA or any combat sports is tough. So the fact that they, tested each other, had the stand-up guy, had the grappler guy, I'm sure there's a lot of things that they could both work on, but we'll call it a draw. I want to say that was the first draw in Empire Promotions history. So, shout out to Jordan Torres out of Legacy up in Cruces. And we'll see what happened with Aaron Hernandez out of Empire for their next fights. Next up on the card, we had Christopher Deere making his debut versus Ishmael Acosta. Acosta out of Zen here in El Paso, Texas, and Deere out of 10th Planet. I had the pleasure to speak to Chris before the fight here on the talk show. And he was all about business. He was talking about he's been wanting to fight for some time, and he wanted to go in there and just, get this thing going. He unfortunately wasn't able to fight prior years because of different things, COVID, life situations, but he was prepared to go in there. And he took a fight against somebody that already had 3 fights with Ish. He had fought recently at CFC not too long ago and got a win. And very tall guy, and Chris more of a shorter guy. But once the fight started, Chris went just straight at Ish's chest, was throwing punches. Ish with the long frame was throwing knees, throwing elbows, just keeping him at bay. But Chris just kept striking, just kind of moving forward, till eventually he got to the point to where he got a hold of Ish and took him down. Unfortunately, it was in the middle of the ring. Ish was able to defend for so long, but Chris was just not giving up the position. He was tight, up high. Ish wasn't able to cause any scrambles. He was blocking. Referee was there kind of watching the whole time, but it was pretty much about almost a minute of Chris being on top, just elbows, punches, maintaining his position up top. Ish was defending. He couldn't really get in a position to cause a scramble, and eventually the ref just couldn't let it keep going. Chris would just kept throwing, elbows and punches the whole time, and Chris gets it done for his debut. He didn't even smile. He just got up, walked away. You know what I mean? He seemed like that's exactly what he wanted to do. So congratulations for him to get his win. Ish moves down to 1-3, unfortunately, in his MMA career. Chris goes to 1-0, but great fight for Empire MMA. Our fifth fight of the night for Defend Your Glory, we had Isaiah Solaita out of Alamogordo, and we had Mario Marquez fighting out of El Paso. And these guys have had a good amount of experience coming into this fight. It was cool to see this fight go down because, Mario was supposed to fight for KFL. The fight fell through. He ended up bowing out for another opponent to get in, so I shout out to him. I gave him props last time for that. But he was able to actually watch Isaiah fight at KFL, and he had made him like, all right, cool. Now I know who I got to fight for Empire. So Isaiah and Mario went at it, and it was cool to see that, shout out to Isaiah, man. This kid is literally fight anytime, anywhere. We were at the Texas Martial Arts Expo. He was there just hanging out, and Carlos, who was running those exhibition smokers, asked, Solaita to jump in, and he had jumped in there. Then he fought at KFL, and then he fought at Empire, and man, he looked good. I mean, Solaita's, coming into his own. He's been, for the amount of fights that he has in a short period of time, a lot of people think that that's crazy, but it's not like he's been healthy. He's been training all this time, and for him to be taking all those fights, he's been okay. He hasn't had like devastating losses to where everybody's kind of worried why he's taking so many fights. But he was taking on a game Marquez. He had fought for Empire before, but didn't go his way. And unfortunately for this one as well, for Mario, he drops down to 0-6 for his career, and Solaita gets it done via submission, rear naked choke in the first round. Right towards the end of the round, too. I've seen that a lot more often now. Towards the end of a round, some people just kind of take it easy because they think they're going to get to the next round. And sure enough, somebody might slip in a submission or just continuing punches. But yeah, Solaita gets it done for Otero Sports, man. He moves up to 4-5, getting 2 wins in a row. Mario drops down to 0-6 for his amateur career. And I'm looking forward to Solaita's new groove and this momentum he's got going on for all these different promotions he's fighting for. But man, shout out to Slim Zaidi out of Otero, 19 years old, gets the dub. Next fight of the night, we had Kurt Felix fighting Nathaniel Vasquez out of Empire. And this fight did not last long. Kurt Felix was game. He was not much to say. I had saw him at the weigh-ins the day before the fight. Just kind of chill, laid back, kind of kept to himself. But man, once that fight started, he went straight right for Nate. Secured a takedown, and a little bit too much for Nate on the ground. Kurt looked so composed. That was one thing. He wasn't really, using too much energy or whatever, but he was able to secure a takedown and get a head and arm choke within a minute of the first round. And it was very impressive. You know what I mean? He moves up to 2-0. He was 1-0 going in, and Nate was going in as a 0-1. He lost his last fight for Empire, but Kurt did get his purple belt after that submission, so it made sense. You know what I mean? He looked good. He looked like a veteran blue belt for sure. Now a purple belt, so shout out to him and congratulations for him. Kurt gets the dub, moves up to 2-0 in his amateur MMA career, and Nate moves down to 0-2. Moving up for a catch weight fight at 160, we had Daniel Hernandez out of Fight House and Jesus Urbina out of Wild West MMA. And this was fun to watch. We had a lot of finishes in the first round. This fight was pretty technical. The first round, they were, standing and banging, throwing some kicks. They both looked good. it was cool because Daniel, I got to spoke with him here on the show, and he was coming in, 0-2 for his career. He wasn't too happy how things were going, but he was more focused and ready for this fight. Jesus was taking on somebody. They had two fights under his two fight experience already in the amateur scene. But Jesus looked good, man. He is a technical guy. The way he's standing and was throwing punches and everything like that. But in the second round, when it went to the ground, that's when Daniel, the Vanilla Gorilla, had the advantage because he had kind of like a weird kind of head and arm choke going on, and even Rodzilla on the broadcast was saying like that's kind of like an odd position for MMA because people can kind of slip out and get to the back. But during the heat of the moment, Jesus had his arm out, and Daniel was able to secure it between his legs and and do that little key lock hold. And unfortunately, Jesus had a tap, and he was frustrated right after that because you can tell, man, he was just getting his groove in. But Daniel, man, looked good. He got his first career win after going 0-2. So I'm excited to see, this little resurgence as he's had with the support and the gym that he's been at. You know what I mean? I'm excited to see him. And Jesus, you know what I mean? He looked good for a debut to fight a guy that, had some experience. And I know that Wild West MMA group is really good up there. So I'm excited to see Jesus come out and, try to right that wrong after getting his night cut short by that submission loss. But shout out to the Vanilla Gorilla. Daniel gets it done. He moves up to 1-2, and Jesus moves down to 0-1 for his career. Our eighth fight of the night, we had D1 standout Isaiah Delgado, the Wolverine, taking on Dante Morales out of Wild West MMA and Cruces. And this was a very interesting fight for me because it was a key matchup in writing down. I was looking through the fights. Isaiah is a D1 wrestler. You know what I mean? So he's making his MMA debut. For me to see any D1 athlete I always get like, damn, this is like a high level athlete. You know what I mean? And he had a good wrestling career, but he wanted to go MMA. So he moved back into town. He's been training at Empire for some time with those guys out there. And Dante, only 19 years old. Not a lot of people are willing to sign up for an MMA debut versus a D1 wrestler. But Dante, in my opinion, was game. Man, this is like the generation of athletes and kids we're seeing that at such a young age, they've already been training for X amount of years. And now we're seeing them actually compete. He looked really relaxed. For him to go in there to fight a D1 wrestler, knowing that he was probably going to get taken down, he had his hands low. He was feeling it. I mean, Isaiah, and no knock against him, man, he's not just a wrestler. He was throwing some bombs. He was throwing some kicks, and that fight was entertaining. Everybody thought that Isaiah was just going to grab Dante, take him down at will, beat him up, and get a win. But this fight ended up going all 3 rounds. It was a lot of back and forth. Dante had some moments in the fight where he looked good, but Isaiah did enough to win, in my opinion, for sure, all 3 rounds. But Isaiah was supposed to win. When I spoke to a lot of people, he was supposed to win. So Dante had nothing to lose fighting a guy for his debut. In my opinion, I'm more excited to see what Dante's going to do now. He's only 19 years old. He got that first fight out of his way. He's at a good training camp. He's up there with shout out to Steel Dragon and Wild West where he's at. And it's cool at such a young age. He was so composed, and he was taking it all in. There was a lot of people yelling for him and a lot of people yelling for Delgado, but Isaiah the Wolverine gets it done, man. He looked impressive, and he's only going to get better. Keep in mind, Isaiah is just learning how to throw punches and learning how to throw kicks. So once he puts that all together, it's going to be very dangerous for all his opponents. And Dante, man, he looked good. Other than that, just being able to, not being able to get up and get taken down here and there. I mean, no shame at all. And I'm excited to see Dante get back in there and see what happens with his career, man, because it looks like he's been training for some time, and this is something that he wants to do for a while. So Isaiah the Wolverine gets it done, moves up to 1-0, winning his debut. Dante goes to 0-1, losing his debut in MMA. Here on the home stretch of the fights, we got fight 9. We had Armando El Flaco Valdez Hernandez versus Irvin Chino Ortiz. Both guys are well known in the El Paso area. Chino was coming in 1-3 for his career, and Armando was at 4-7. I've seen Armando fight in boxing. I've seen him fight for Empire before, so I know he was game. I've seen Chino around EKA, and he's always like training. Like that guy is always training. I follow him on social. And it was cool once that fight got announced. Shout out to Empire for that matchup. But once I saw those guys lined up, I was like, "Ooh, it's gonna be interesting," because these guys are both technical, both super technical. The fight was a lot of back and forth. Chino really tight, counter punching. Armando coming forward. There was a lot of punches, a lot of kicks. You know, they went into the second round, and in the second round, Armando was like coming forward, and Chino was like kind of countering and tagging him. Eventually, it got to the point that he like tagged him one good time, and Armando dropped. Chino was able to swarm him and was punching. And from the angle that I saw, I couldn't see what was really going on. The ref had to run around to the front, and as the ref pulled him off, Armando was grabbing his leg, and everybody was like just thrown off that, you know, it seemed like an early stoppage. You know, I'm not a referee. I couldn't see what happened. But I thought that Armando was fine. Did I think that he could have got up if, you know, Chino kept punching him? I don't know. You know, but credit to Chino. He kept tagging him. And he had that big punch that dropped him. So it wasn't just like a flake punch or anything. It was a good punch because Armando hardly ever goes down. He went down. He was on all fours, and Chino was punching. So, I mean, Chino did what he was supposed to do. The referee had saw something else. I know a lot of people were upset with the early stoppage, but, you know, this is the amateur game. You know, we gotta watch out for the fighters. You know what I mean? The fighters will go until they can't. You know what I mean? So it's the coach's job, the referee's job to protect the fighters. I don't know. I mean, in my opinion, Chino was already kind of getting away with the fight and, you know, moving forward. But, you know, he gets it done. Chino gets a TKO done. He looked good at that fight. Armando looked good too, man. Armando's not a slouch. And for him to go back-to-back for Empire fighting and not going his way, you know, it was good to see Armando go out there. And Chino gets a dub, you know what I mean? So Chino moves up to 2-3 in his amateur career out of EKA, and Armando goes down to 4-8 as an amateur. But, you know, those two guys are always fun to watch, and I look forward to see what they got next in their careers. 10th fight of the night, we had Alexis Texas. I'm just kidding, Alexis. Alexis Ortiz fighting out of Independent Grappling / Empire MMA. Then we had Jose Alberto Berkowitz fighting out of 10th Planet in Tucson. Very interesting matchup. You know, we had Jose 5'11", you know, and Alexis 5'4". You know, they both had a background in jiu-jitsu, so I was kind of curious to see, you know, how it was going to go. Eventually, the fight started, and Alexis pretty much took no time to let everybody know what he was trying to do. He took Jose down. He was able to work a little bit. They were really right in front of us, cage side by Rodzilla and I, but Alexis looked really good. Heavy pressure. Once he got Jose down, it was hard for him to get up, even with his extensive jiu-jitsu background as well. Alexis was hitting, you know, eventually got to his back and got the choke. You know, shout out to Jose, man. He was fighting to the very end, but Alexis looked so good, man. Alexis, you know, was on a one-fight win streak. He only had one fight for Melee before. And we had spoke to him on the show, you know, at the gym at Empire when I was there. And he was ready to settle in on this MMA career. And he's such a calm guy. And I love, you know, I love seeing guys that are just really confident in themselves and what they're trying to do. especially when it comes to combat sports, man. So for him to take the time to focus on jujitsu and pursue that for bigger events and things like that, and for him to loop back around and say, you know what, I want to fight now. He looked great, man. So Alexis moves to 2-0. Jose was 1-1 coming into that, so now he's 1-2, fighting out of Mexico, but trains out of 10th Planet. You know what I mean? Shout out to Alexis getting it done in the first round, about 155 into the match. Moving up towards the top of the card in a key matchup, we had Ruben Air Luna out of Zen Martial Arts and Jacob Size out of Red Hawk. And I was curious about this matchup. Both super nice guys. They were complimenting each other at the conference and what they fight for in their faith. So it's cool to see that. Always respectable. Luna was coming off a last win at KFL. And, Jacob was coming in 1-1-1. And first round, there was a lot of back and forth. There were some kicks. There were some punches. Ruben had like a spinning back punch. And, Jacob answered right back. And, I was curious how Ruben was going to use his judo. If you guys don't know, he's the youngest black belt in El Paso for judo. And I thought he was going to get in there, use it right away. But he was more than willing to stand with Jacob. They were going back and forth. It got to the point to where Ruben kind of got a hold of him. And Rodzilla was kind of jelly. Let me see this black belt in action. We thought we were going to see a throw. Ruben went for a single. And there was kind of like a weird scramble. And he was taking him down. And as they were falling, like Ruben automatically just shot for his leg. And I thought was going for a knee bar. But he ended up just turning it. And it turned into a heel hook. And anytime I see anything with knees or ankles or legs, I squirm. Jacob immediately tapped. And Air Luna got that heel hook towards the end of the first round. And he got the first heel hook that the ladies from MMA Stalker, shout out to those girls, Ro, but they said that was the first heel hook they had saw in 1,300 fights they've covered, so that was crazy. Air Luna did get the submission of the night. He moves up to 3-2 in his career, and Jacob moves down to 1-3. It was cool for Aaron and Ro to be there from MMA Stalker and for them to capture that. They do cover a lot of fights in the Southwest and out in the West Coast. So for them to say, hey, this is the first heel hook that we've seen in 1,300 fights was cool. So shout out to Air Luna. Gets the bonus as well. Moves up to 3-2 and Jacob to 1-3. 12th matchup of Defend Your Glory, we had Alfredo Beast Boy Alvara out of Borg MMA in Albuquerque coming down on a 3-fight finishing win streak versus Gabo Peñado out of Bloodline/Empire MMA coming in at 2-2. Gabo had recently fought at APFC, didn't go his way, had won before at Empire. So he was on a win-loss streak. But Beast Boy was on a 3-fight winning streak. Not even just a winning streak, but a finish streak. I got to see him fight at KFL, and he looked super impressive. So I was curious to see how this one was going to go down. They had moved these guys up toward the top of the card because, Gabo is a local favorite in El Paso. And for him to have an opportunity to test himself against Alfredo, I thought it was really cool to see that at a young stage of his career. Gabo was only 18 years old. Alfredo was 26 and had been fighting for some time. A lot of back and forth during the fight. But it got to the point to where I think Gabo's punches were a little bit too much for Alfredo. Alfredo wasn't able to kind of implement his plan. I thought there was going to be more grappling there. But Gabo did a good job of defending anything that kind of been a takedown. And just tagged him 1 or 2 good times and then just ended up finishing the fight. TKO. The referee jumped in. Man, Gabo looks super impressive at that 135 weight class. Beast Boy breaks his streak of those 3-fight winning streak and finish streak, moves down to 3-4. Gabo now up on his record now, 3-2. Excited to see where Gabo goes from here. You know, he's got a lot of opportunities. A young guy who's barely just coming into his own and has a lot of opportunities to fight for different promotions and different things. So I'm excited to see where he goes next. Alfredo goes back to the drawing board, has a great camp. You know, he's got Ray Borg in his corner. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know who Ray is. Go look him up. And to be fighting out of that gym. So I'm curious to see what Alfredo does next. You know what I mean? He breaks that streak. But I don't think he's going to deter him from wanting to fight again. You know what I mean? It just wasn't his night. And Gabo gets it done for that key matchup. Bantamweight belt was on the line for Defend Your Glory. We had Julius Vega fighting out of Red Hawk out in Arizona, coming down to fight local favorite Caesar Kid Buu Sandoval. Both guys were coming in for this vacant title fight. It was going to be styles of wrestling, from my understanding. I've never seen Julius fight before. I've seen Caesar fight. I've been around him and his teammates. So it was going to be a grappling match, from my understanding. And we sure did get that. You know, Julius pretty much imposed his grappling skill over Caesar. You know, I've never seen Caesar get really like out wrestled or grappled like that in his young career. That's one of his bread and butters. So for Caesar to be not be able to really do much, I mean, Julius, you know, won the fight like straight up all 5 rounds, in my opinion, won and all of those. And he's got a lot of experience, man. He's fought for Rough, Rise of the Prospects, LFA, you know, fought at Arizona. So I was more curious to see how Caesar was going to be able to fight somebody with such, you know, high skill level, and as far as like tough fights for organizations already. Not that Caesar hasn't fought anybody tough either, but, you know, Julius seemed like more of the favorite coming in, and he made it a point to just wash out Caesar. I mean, Julius got those takedowns. There was a lot of like scrambles and stuff, but Julius always was on top, you know, beating him up. It was not that of a crazy fight for fans or anything, but there was a lot of stuff going on both sides. There was, you know, Caesar was trying to do his best to try to get up in different ways, and the way Julius was just using his body and, you know, being able just to stay heavy on him. You know what I mean? Because Julius was only 5'4", Caesar's 5'9", and you can tell the height. And I was kind of jokingly, I don't know Julius, but man, he does look like Henry Cejudo, and he was wrestling like Cejudo, man, just staying on top, being heavy. He gets the vacant belt, but we won't get to see him in Empire again. You know what I mean? He did go ahead and say he will making his pro debut. Moving on, you know what I mean? He ends his amateur record on 5-3. You know, so I wish him well and good luck, and I see him in the pro scene. Caesar moves down to 5-3 himself. So very good matchup. You know, now the belt it's vacant again, so we'll see what happens for the promotion moving forward at that bantamweight class. The co-main event of Defend Your Glory, 125 flyweight champion makes his first title defense. Chris, the Assassin, babyface assassin, man-face assassin. We're going to figure out his nickname, but takes on the tough Brendan Willard out of Cruces. And for me, this was one of the fights that I was looking forward to the most. I mean, I like seeing all the fights, but for me, this was very interesting because I got to see both of these fighters when they first started fighting over a year ago, and just slowly just becoming better mixed martial artists. So the fact that these two guys were fighting at such a young age against each other, I was really excited to see that. So, man, the co-main was set up for the night. It was a 14th fight on the card right before the main event. And Chris made it a point to go across that cage and get in Brendan Willard's face right away. He was able to, Willard was able to to get some punches off and get some kicks off. And I think Chris just kind of stepped on the pedal, got a couple punches, got an overhand right, and kind of stunned Willard. And, Chris swarmed and, got on top, was punching. Willard was doing his best to defend, was rolling out. But eventually, it was just too much for Willard. The referee was giving him more than enough chance for a title fight to try to get out of that bit situation. But Chris went ahead and got that TKO done. He looked at his corner, got the thumbs up, then he climbed the cage. They always kind of give him a hard time for climbing the cage. But, man, he said it during the post-fight interview. He said, hey, Jimmy, you're not a champ until you defend the title. It's cliche, but Chris looked great. Chris looked great. He moves up to 5-1 in his amateur career, defending his belt. He won the belt in the last Empire, then defended it. I know a pro career is around the corner. I would like to see him get another fight or two in the amateur scene and see where it goes. For Brendan, it's for sure not the end for him. I'm excited to see how he comes back from this, because he was on a 2-fight win streak himself, and he's just coming into his own. And I know he's up there with Steel Dragon with Coach Steve, and I think they're just going to go back to the drawing board. I don't think he was really hurt or anything like that. So I don't see him, not getting a fight within the next couple months or so, or maybe he just might take it easy. But, this amateur or even combat sports, it's not for the faint. There's a high in the highs and the lows and lows. They were both coming in on 2-fight win streaks against each other. Somebody had to win. Chris got it done this time, and keeps the belt, and Willard moves down to 3-3 in his career, and Chris is now 5-1. The main event, only pro fight on the card out of this 15 fight card. There was 17 fights initially, 15 got done, but at the top of the marquee, how this card was built around this title fight. This was the first pro title fight for Empire, and I was excited to see two guys that were on streaks themselves coming in. Ricky the Savage Diamond Maynes versus Xavier Ironside Martin. And yeah, I mean, talk about having two different types of fighters with two different types of personalities and styles, fighting each other. A lot of people were like, oh man, there is no way Ricky's going to lose this fight. There was a lot of people saying there is no way Xavier is going to lose this fight. So I was excited to see how this was going to play out. I get a lot of, now that I'm involved more and I get to talk to people, everybody asks me what I think. And what I initially said to the close people that I talked to is I said, I'm going to see leg kicks from Ricky, defend takedowns, and that's what I expect from Ricky. What I expect from Xavier was patience, catch a kick, and go for a takedown, and just kind of be relentless. That's what I personally thought ahead of time. I was talking to Rodzilla before the fight started. He's like, who do you think? I was like, look, this is what I think is going to happen. It's either going to be Ricky leg kicks, defending takedowns, getting up, making Xavier pay every time he went in, or Xavier getting a takedown and beating up Ricky. So it could have gone either way, and I was excited to sit there front row. Into the first round, we got exactly what we thought was going to happen as far as Ricky had some kicks. Xavier did get a takedown, but one thing is that Ricky is, like, a lot of people underestimate his grappling skills. So he was able to actually get up right away from a takedown, and he went ahead and did a takedown on his own. And it was so crazy. I don't ever want to say because of this, because of that, but as Ricky was, he literally grabbed him and slammed him on the floor, and they were grappling on the floor. At that time, it seemed like something had happened for sure. And Xavier right away started grappling and got to Ricky's back. And during that time, I was like, this is not good for Ricky. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that Xavier, he might joke around or whatever, but this kid is an animal. He's a young guy, high-level athlete, high-level grappler. He had 2 finishes in his last 2 fights. He was on a win streak. Ricky was on a 2 TKO win streak. So these guys fighting each other it was going to be fireworks either way. But the thing is that Xavier looks so calm and composed in there. You know what I mean? He's joking around. He's doing the Spider-Man thing at the weigh-ins. But when that fight started, he was serious. You know what I mean? Ricky is always game. But, Man, I wanted it to go longer. I wanted it to go longer, but to credit to Xavier, man, he was built for the moment. He was ready to go because once Ricky took him down and the scramble happened again and Xavier got to his back, he even told me, he's like, man, nobody gives me their back like this. So for the fact that I don't know if Ricky was kind of like in a bad situation or whatever. Later on, we found out that he did hurt his shoulder during that match. But I think on the ground game, eventually Xavier could have, ran away with it more and more. We never know. But to credit to Xavier, he took advantage of the scramble and got to his back. And Ricky had no chance to defend that takedown, to defend that choke. Was up against the cage, and Xavier over time was able to sneak that in, take his time, and got the tap, man. So it was crazy to see that because the crowd, it was 50-50. Everybody was there. These guys have a great following. They have a lot of respect from their fellow teammates, their coaches and their families. And a lot of people here in the combat sports community applaud those two guys, you know what I mean? Because we love seeing fights like that. And credit to Ricky, shook his hand, lost fair and square, made no excuses. Xavier was like surprised that he was able just to get it done that fast. Xavier said, I'm going to win this fight. I don't know how I'm going to win, but I'm going to win. So for it to happen so fast within that first round, it was at the 3-minute mark almost of the first round. I thought it was going to go a little longer, but credit to Ironside. 3-fight win streak, 3 submission winning streak, and becomes the first lightweight pro title holder for Empire Promotions. So Ricky moves down to 2-4 for his career. I know he'll be back. I know Ricky will be back. He says that this is a resurgence and he sees himself fighting for some time. So this is just a bump in the road. He's going to be able to go back, take some time with his family, whatever, and, focus on his team. And, he'll get back in there, I'm sure, early next year. And then, Xavier, 3-2 now after starting his career 0-2, getting 3 wins in a row, not just wins, but 3 submission wins, and becoming the first pro lightweight for Empire. Very impressive for him at such a young age. Great card overall. I mean, I'm so fortunate to be able to get to know all the promoters, all the coaches, all the fighters, and to be able to go to these events and, cover them. If I'm commentating, taking pictures, doing videography for all these different promotions. So shout out to all the folks that are so welcome to me to be involved how I am, as little or as much as I can be with the promotions and the fighters and the coaches, man. But 15 fights for Empire, shout out to the Vasquez family. This is their 4th event this year. They got the boxing one done. They get 3 MMA in a row. So, shout out to Serena and Charlie and everybody else who's involved with setting up the cages and everything like that. There's a lot of people that make this thing, happen, from people that's setting up the cage, setting up the chairs, doing things in the back at the weigh-ins, all the sponsors that were able to financially support the event, man. It was cool to see. And with all these different promotions growing in the Southwest, man, I can only imagine how it's going to look next year. And the opportunities for different fighters to get, fights here in the Southwest and not have to go far. You know what I mean? You can go to Cruces, you can go to El Paso, and you guys got from Cruces, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, all fighting each other in this region. And it's only going to get bigger, man. But if you made it this far, make sure you guys hit that like button, drop a comment in the comment section. I appreciate you guys. I love doing these breakdowns. We got CFC coming up next, and I'm excited for those fights as well. And if you guys see me around, say what's up. Until next time, we'll see you at the fights. Peace.